from the perspective of masculinity, what does ministry do to you?
Prior to ministry, I was not very sensitive. I was one of the most insensitive people. So, I prayed for this student. This was actually a girls' school. And she started manifesting demons. That time, I had never really known how to cast out devils properly. I began to rebuke spirits, and the more I rebuked, the more the spirits are speaking at me. I got so angry, got hold of this girl and started shaking her. So fortunately enough, there was a guy who was my senior. He carefully just came, removed me from that scenario, and he sorted out that thing. You're dealing with parents who do not understand what you've done. My father was the most infuriated person. He never wanted to have anything to do with me. He spoke to my siblings in a way to imply that they should not emulate my example. So in a way, I was more like a black sheep.
Did you ever think of going back to teaching?
Yes, there was a time. Hey. It reached a point whereby I began to question whether I was really called, because you're in a state whereby you're not able to meet your own basic needs.
What are some of the most memorable mistakes you can remember as a young minister?
Mistakes that I ever made was my first sermon. It was in a weekend challenge. I was quoting scriptures haywardly, and there's nothing that is as bad as you misquoting a scripture and then you hear a student correcting you. It was so embarrassing.
Yeah. Everywhere you look on social media, you'll always hear stories of people who have gone through church hurt, as they call it. As in, there's not a shortage of those kind of stories. And some of those are, they actually come from a sincere place. But we never really get to hear the other side of the story. So in your experience as a minister of God's word, have you been mishandled? Is it a conversation that pastors discuss?
Being a pastor, I can tell you, is very risky. It's because your life is open. You open your house to people, you expose your personality to people, and that is what the congregants will use against you. And let's not also make a mistake of thinking that pastors are not human beings. We make mistakes.
Have you ever gotten to that point where you wanted to sting wacha ikae?
There was a time I wanted to quit Infinite Fellowship Ministries. Because of things that were going on that I could not understand. Between 75 to 80% of pastors in the US resign every year because of myriad of issues.
You're a man. You are a man. Stand up and be a man.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Truest Measure podcast, where we celebrate men and the brilliant things that they do. Our guest today is someone very special to me personally. I know that most of you will be able to appreciate some of the things that we'll share today. For some of you, he's very familiar, so you'll be able to know once you see him. Now, before we proceed, let me just point out that our guest today is an author to a life transformative book. Life is all about purpose, and the clearer your vision regarding your purpose, the easier it becomes for you to navigate different seasons and different areas of your life. This book, Understanding Vision in Light of Purpose, is a must-have for anybody who wants to understand the purpose of why they are here and what exactly they're supposed to be doing. Details of how you can purchase this book is on the screen, as well as the description of this video. So, Bishop John Gobanga, karibu sana. There's something I want you to do for me. It's something we usually do in this podcast. So I want you to say, "What's up, guys?" It's how we introduce the show.
What's up or what's up?
What's up, like what's up, people. But now you have to do it with a lot of swag.
Hey.
What's up?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, what's up? Millennials always get me off guard, but nonetheless, I do understand, I get it. So what's up?
Well done. Thank you for that. So I think we'll just jump right into it. But before we get there, the 4 magical things that you need to do. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Not just so that YouTube can push it to other people, but so that we can get to know whether these conversations are really impacting you, whether they are resonating with you. So Bishop, I want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself. So who is John Gobanga to those who are seeing you for the first time?
Gobanga John, if I may rearrange my names, because I prefer it that way.
Okay.
He's a minister of the gospel. I'm a bishop by calling. I was consecrated as a bishop in 2017, and I'm the presiding clergy of the Infinite Fellowship Ministries, based here in Nairobi. I'm the firstborn in the Gobanga family, or the Gobanga nation. In terms of background, professional background, that is, I'm a teacher by training, though I never taught for many years. I just taught for a few years, and then when the call of God was quite evident in my life, I decided that I was going to leave my teaching career and just proceed on to ministry. I avoid using the word full-time ministry because sometimes that the word full-time is often misused, and many other times whereby people think that if you are in full-time ministry, you are not employed. But I also believe whatever vocation that you're involved in is a ministry in itself. So I wouldn't want to use the term full-time ministry. I would want to say just focusing on the work of the ministry that I currently do. I got into ministry sometime in 1998. And in terms of full pastoral ministry, I would actually say I began it at around 2005. I started at a church at Kariobangi South in Eastlands. Then from there I moved on to Kayole at a place known as Soweto. I was a senior pastor of New Hope Worship Center. And then by the leading of the Spirit of God, I handed over that ministry to my assistant pastor, because God was calling me to start a new work in town, otherwise known as the Infinite Fellowship Ministries, which I'm currently pastoring. I love traditional foods. I think I'm very conservative. I love traditional foods more than continental. When we go traditional, when we go organic, then you get me.
They are tholas.
Yes, I mean, I'm very much at home. I like brown ugali. I like osuga. Yes, all those things. Obambo, you know, mbuta. Of course, when it comes to mbuta, you have to really be very careful how it is prepared. I really like traditional foods because when I look at how I grew up, I was brought up in a family where we ate traditional Luya foods. And of course, as a kid, I used to complain a lot about the bitter herbs that my mom used to prepare. But looking back in hindsight, I realized that those were actually the things that were good, because I usually look for them. I grew up in a family where my parents were very conservative. They believed in respect for elders. I grew up in the time whereby whatever the teacher says is law. The teacher is always right, regardless of what. And my parents were the kind of people who sided with teachers, even though sometimes teachers tended to probably be wrong. That was actually the kind of family I grew up in. My dad was actually a policeman. He served in the CID, so you can imagine how my life was. It was more of a military upbringing, but of course in a good way. And discipline was the order of the day. I enjoy touring different places, I always love meeting people from different backgrounds, interacting with them. That would be a brief summary about myself.
To who you are.
Yeah,
I really I like that introduction, because most of the time, like I was saying to in an episode we've also shot, sometimes when you ask people who they are, what people tend to do is tell you what they do. They start telling you their careers and things like that. And in as much as that is usually connected to who you are, there's that inner person of who you really are. Such that even when the career is taken away, you still retain who you really are. So I think you've given us a really in-depth description, which I believe serves the purpose. Now, you've mentioned how you used to be in teaching and God led you into ministry. And you've spoken like it was such a smooth transition. But how was it really in reality,
Well,
is it something you were excited to do,
let me begin by saying that I don't know about other ministers, but to the best of my knowledge, most times people who transition from what they are doing into ministry is not usually smooth. And of course, when I say it not being smooth, I may not necessarily mean that you get into ministry because of the fact that you're subjected to some roughness of sorts. For me, it was rough. Not just smooth, it was rough. It was rough because, you see, I had settled down in my teaching career, and I had issues with the Teacher Service Commission. I was interdicted twice. The first time was because I was very rude to my superiors. Where I was actually teaching in Transmara district. Those days we used to have districts. So I clashed with one of the education officers, and as a result, he reported me. And then I was told to go to some remote school on disciplinary grounds, and I felt it was malicious. So I said, I'm not going, and I was interdicted for 18 months. Then I was...
So when you're interdicted, that means you don't teach during that period?
You don't teach. Yeah, you actually stay at home. It's some sort of a suspension. So I was called after 18 months, I was actually summoned by the Teacher Service Commission disciplinary tribunal. Those days, they used to say to, I think, a development house. I think I'm actually forgetting. Then, of course, I went to argue my case. And as usual, that panel comprises of people who, I don't know whether there's an automated way of not reasoning. They just don't reason. I don't know about today, but in those days, they would never reason. But you see, I stated my case. I was reinstated and sent back to Transmara, something which I didn't like, but nonetheless, I went. So the district education officer posted me now to a school that I chose. Because I had actually vowed that if I was going to be taken to that division where I was never ever going to go back there. I would actually write a resignation letter. So I went to the school where I was. And then, after teaching for some time, it's like I realized my salary was not coming. I tried to follow up, salary was not coming. Wrote letters, did everything, went even to TSC. I was just being taken round and round and round. And you see, around that time, I had actually developed an interest in matters of ministry. And so I began to wonder, well, do I quit teaching? Do I stay in it while,
was it intentional delaying your salary?
Well, I am tempted to believe it was intentional. Because you see, in our country, one of the things you'll discover is that there's a lot of bureaucracy, and the bureaucracy is always laced with corruption. And I think somebody in the Teacher Service Commission wanted me to accept to part with part of my salary, because I used to hear such kind of stories. And as far as I was concerned, that is nonsense. I would not do that. So after some time, I decided, what, if I cannot be paid my salary, I'm not going back. So I just decided to go home. I didn't even inform anyone. My head teacher tried to follow up on me to find out what was going on, and I decided that I'm not even getting in touch with him. But I still tried to write letters to the Teacher Service Commission. Those days we didn't have emails and so on. Everything was analog, but it looked like nothing was forthcoming. So the next thing is that I get another communication that I'm interdicted. So I really wondered now, how do you interdict someone whom you're not even paying? So I told my parents what's going on. And furthermore, I had also reached a point I told myself, I want to get into ministry. So then again, I was summoned.
This is after you've left.
Yes. So I was summoned again by a tribunal of the Teacher Service Commission. Normally, the TSC tribunal is normally comprised of, I think, a few commissioners of the TSC, and I think other officials. I may really not know. So when I went there, and I told them, you see, I have not come here to plead to be reinstated. I've come here because I want to resign. I want to resign because I want to go into ministry. So, they were shocked because they looked at me and they told me, but first of all, you're so young. I mean, why would you want to resign?
Yeah.
And I told them, in the first place, I've actually been able to survive without a salary for all this time. And that is an indication of the fact that it's not the salary that keeps me going.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm aware that I'm young. I just told them that I feel I want to serve God. I've tried to feel, to stay as a teacher, but I think I've become so frustrated. And you see, even prior to, going to face the tribunal, there were a couple of ministers of God who had actually told me prophetically that teaching is not my thing, that I'm in the wrong profession, and that's why I'm really suffering. Because for sure, I was suffering emotionally and psychologically. I could not understand how you can be employed by the Kenya government and some people somewhere decide that you will not be paid, you see. And unfortunately, that is a problem we have facing the teaching profession, especially for those who teach in public or government schools. But, I thought about it, I prayed about it, and I felt that maybe it would be better that I just let go of my teaching career. And I turned just to go into ministry. Of course, when I was getting into ministry, it was not an easy path. It was rough because you're no longer on salary. And then, you're dealing with parents who do not understand what you've done. My father was the most infuriated person. He never wanted to have anything to do with me. And even, it's like he spoke to my siblings in a way to imply that they should not emulate my example. So in a way, I was more like a black sheep, sort of being ostracized. And you can even tell that the environment at home at that time, because I was still staying with my parents, there was it was sort of a cold war of sorts that you're not needed because you're not useful.
Yeah.
So, but I just had to walk by faith. And I can tell you the truth, I didn't know where I was going. I didn't even understand many things.
I think that's a very significant point because for many of us, we assume that when God leads you somewhere, when God tells you to go somewhere, things are clear. Like every step of what you need to take should be in place.
One of the things that I can tell you is God will never give you everything.
Yeah.
You see, God will speak to you about the future, but He'll never reveal to you the process.
The details, yeah.
I didn't know what process I was going to go through. The call was evident, but the process itself, the journey and what I was going to experience was never revealed to me.
Yeah.
I got to touch base with this along the way. Whereby, number one, you get rejected at home, you get rejected by even your own friends, some of whom could not understand why I was in this thing. And it's true, I could not blame them. And it reached a point whereby I began to question whether I was really called, because you're in a state whereby you're not able to meet your own basic needs.
Yeah.
You move from home to start living with people who do not understand what you're getting into. They do not understand.
Yeah.
So it was a very difficult period of time, a very long transition, I would say.
Did you ever think of going back to teaching?
Yes, there was a time. Hey. There was a time actually I tried to apply, and I applied to a couple of schools. And there was one particular institution where they later on told me they do not know why they cannot take me.
Wow.
I thought probably the reason why I never qualified was because of some mistake. But they told me they have no reason why.
They just don't want you.
It really hurt because how do you just tell someone that you have no reason why, but you're not being taken? But other guys were taken. Actually, among those who had gone for the interview, I was the only person for that particular institution. There were several others where I went for interviews, but it didn't work. And that's when it dawned on me that, you know what, there's no way I'm going to actually quit, or rather go back to teaching. I mean, ministry, hard or soft.
Yeah. Wow. So, how long have you been in ministry?
Wow, so I've been in ministry for 26 years. I've really never had any count of sorts.
So, from the perspective of masculinity, what does ministry do to you as a man? Where do you feel it resonates with you as a man? When you are there doing ministry, you are a bishop, you are pastoring people, you're teaching. What does it do to you as a man?
You know, in ministry, you deal with different categories of people. You deal with the older generation, you deal with the younger generation. Of course, you deal with male and female gender, you deal with children, you deal with those who are high and mighty in society, you deal with those who are impoverished, and so on. So what ministry has done to me over the years is that it has enabled me to grow insofar as my sensitivity is concerned. Because I realized prior to ministry, I was not very sensitive. I was
Emotionally?
Emotionally and even psychologically. I was one of the most insensitive people within my own circles of age mates. But I realized that for you to be able to serve God and to take care of God's people, you have to develop a high sense of sensitivity whereby you have empathy for people, whereby you mind about the welfare of people, not just spiritually, because you see, ministry is holistic. You have to look into the social and economic aspects of people, whereby sometimes you have to go an extra mile after all is said and done. You know, people are not going to eat the gospel. You come across people who are hungry and they need at least to have some food. So you have to go into your pocket and, you know, find a way of just providing meals for people. Sometimes as a minister, you have to pay school fees, you take care of medical expenses. You have to do all kinds of things. You have to also go visit the sick in the hospital. You have to bury those who are dead and so on. So as a result, you know, you realize that in as much as you're a man of God, you're a human being and you're dealing with people who are human beings like you, people who have issues and you cannot ignore them. So that in and of itself has made me become very sensitive, very mindful of people. You know, it's also expanded my heart as a person. To the point that, you know, when I look back, you know, before, like, when you look at now Infamy, our church, when I started off with you guys were in campus. But over time, when most of you, you know, finished campus, got married, and you got children. So now, you know, it is your kids that I'm very much keen about. And, you know, when children come, for me, it's those ones of, I really have to accommodate how they are. When they come home, they get hold of all these pillows and poofs and they put them on the floor. Of course, any other person doing that, it would be an issue. But for the kids, I would just allow them. It's expected. I'm forced to just have fun with them and come down to their level. So it also makes me feel that, you know, I need just to, what would I say, unwind from that stage of being a bishop to just being childlike.
Wow. I like how you are connecting it to, you know, like where you came from to what it's making you become now. And I'm imagining that in the process, there are some mistakes that you made. When you're talking about 26 years, I'm sure there are some, there's some mistakes that you made along the way. So what are some of the most memorable mistakes you can remember as a young minister up to the point that you've gotten right now?
Well, one of the most outstanding, I call it the most outstanding mistakes that I ever made was my first sermon. It was in a weekend challenge at St. Peter's School, Mumias. It's a high school in Mumias in the larger Kakamega County. You know, I had prepared this sermon, I had prayed, I had fasted, and I knew God was going to move. only to stand on the pulpit before these students, and I fumbled. It's like I have what I had prepared as my sermon notes, but I was not able to even refer to those notes. I was quoting scriptures haywardly. And you know, there's nothing that is as bad as you misquoting a scripture and then you hear a student correcting you, you know. It was so embarrassing.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I'm the man of God. I've worn my suit, you know, and I feel I'm full of the Holy Ghost.
Yeah.
And I can't just remember simple scriptures, you know.
Yeah.
I really fumbled.
Yeah.
And I ended up not even concluding the sermon. I was very embarrassed, and I swore never ever to preach again. I told God, this is so embarrassing. But I also realized it was good because I forgot one thing, that when it comes to ministry, when it comes to preaching especially, it's not so much about your intellect. It's not so much about you leaning on your own understanding. It is putting your trust in God. So I trusted in myself. I trusted in my eloquence. I can assure you on that day there was no eloquence. I ended up even shrubbing. It was so bad. And you know, you can imagine high school students laughing at you. You know?
High schoolers they have no mercy.
That was a very interesting mistake that I made. But of course, given that that was actually my first sermon. And then another mistake which I made in ministry, there was this time I went for prayer and fasting in a prayer mountain. Now, normally when you've gone for a long, you know, fasting, whether it's 14 days or 21 days, you're always advised that when you're breaking the fast, you do not break with solid foods immediately. You start with semi-solids. I had the audacity to take cassavas. I can assure you, I was in agony. I felt such a discomfort in my tummy. I thought I was going to die.
How long was the fast?
This must have bI 14 days.
Oh, that's a long one.
Yeah, 14 days. And mark you, it was a 14 days, you know, what you'd call a total fast, whereby you're just taking, I was just taking water and also taking black cocoa. Now, after that, you know, I take cassava, boiled cassava. I'm telling you, it was quite an agonizing moment. I don't know how long that duration lasted, but it was bad. I thought I was dying.
It was painful.
It was very painful. And for those of you who are upcoming ministers, if at all you're called to ministry, if you've never fasted, don't try this at home or in a prayer mountain. It's detrimental to your health. After you fasted, you start by taking semi-solid foods, and then you have to wait for a duration of time before you start taking solid foods. And even when you start taking solid foods, you have to take them in small bits, small portions.
You don't serve a whole plate.
That was quite awkward. And then the other mistake, this was, I think, in a weekend challenge. You know, you've preached. That time, at least, I was able to get my preaching act well. And then it came to the time whereby we want to do ministration on people. So, you know, I prayed for this student. This was actually a girls' school. And she started manifesting demons. That time, I'd never really known how to cast out devils properly. And I began to rebuke spirits. And, you know, the more I rebuked, the more the spirits are speaking at me. I got so angry, got hold of this girl and started shaking her. So fortunately enough, there was a guy who was my senior. He carefully just came, removed me from that scenario, and he sorted out that thing. And then after that, he had to call me aside and he rebuked me. He told me that that's not how you do things. So I had to go to God, and I told the Lord, now, you know, if I'm a minister, I need to know how to handle demonic activity. But by and large, I was able to come out of that. So those are some of my...
And during that time, when you're trying to, you know, you're calling out this spirit, it's not coming out. Do you have a thought in your mind, like you have to prove that you are legit?
Of course. I mean, when you're a young minister, you have to prove. Everything was proving. That first sermon, I had to prove that I'm a good minister. And of course, it backfired. When I'm casting out the devil, I was proving. I mean, that I'm the man of God. But now, it's like those spirits were now addressing me. You know? And the spirits were not, you'd find that demons tend to assume a voice that is very different from that voice of the person. So it was a very interesting experience. And I was wondering what's going on. I mean, you are supposed to come out when I call Jesus' name, you know? So it was funny. Yeah, it was really funny. But I thank God for those mistakes because I learned from them. Yeah.
So as we transition on the same on the same question, what are the things that you look at and you're proud of it? Like, you know, these are the embarrassing moments, but these are the things that I'm grateful that I did this or I experienced this, you know.
To see the transformation, to see someone who was once upon a time a drunkard becoming a responsible member of the society, not just a believer, to find someone who was raised by a single mother under very in very deplorable conditions, becoming an evangelist, to be able also to help young people provide or rather find solutions for the things that affect them, especially when you're dealing with a case of an individual who's on the verge of committing suicide. And the next thing is that this person turns around and no longer considers suicide as an option. That for me has actually been a plus. And also, I would dare say that, you know, when I started off, you know, when I started pastoring young people, a lot of their parents were, you know, they questioned whether I was a man of integrity. And of course, at that time, you know, given that you're a young pastor and you're not married and you're dealing with people's daughters, so questions would come up. I mean, how sure are we? What experience does he have? And I remember I used to tell some of those young people during that time that, you know, if we are of God, no matter what people say of us, we'll be vindicated. But if we are fake, it doesn't matter how authentic we might present ourselves to be. Every aspect of being fake will actually be made manifest. And after a period of time, there has been fruit. And the same people who are accusing me, it's like they end up heaping praises on me. So that in itself is vindication. So I'm really happy to just see that. And to also see that, to be able to glory in the fact that when I started now Infinite Fellowship Ministries, it coincided with the time whereby most of the members were in their first year in university. So it's like I've seen them grow. You graduate with honors. From honors, you get a good job or you get into business. You get married in the Lord and you start families. That for me is something.
Wow. I love that. And just on that aspect of handling people in ministry, everywhere you look on social media, you'll always hear stories of people who have gone through church hurt, as they call it. You know, someone was mishandled by a pastor, or someone was mishandled by congregations or whatever. As in, there's not a shortage of those kind of stories. And some of those are, you know, they actually come from a sincere place. Some of them have actually been mishandled. But we never really get to hear the other side of the story. You know, we never really get to hear what pastors have to say. So in your experience as a minister of God's word, have you been mishandled? You know, is it a conversation that pastors discuss about how a certain congregant did certain things to them?
It is good that for the first time I'm in a forum where I have an opportunity to share a pastoral perspective of church hurt. And many times, you know, people think that pastors are invincible, pastors are immune from being hurt. And it has always been we pastors mishandling people. And it's good that you've asked that question. Yes, I have actually been a victim of church hurt in my capacity as a pastor, being either being mishandled by a congregant, being misunderstood. You know, because of my kind of personality, I tend to be very forthright. I see things in black and white. So there have been instances whereby the things that I say on the pulpit, or even outside the pulpit, you find that portions of my remarks are lifted out of context and they are magnified in every place, such that people begin to think, those who do not know me begin to think that this kind of a person is so bad. And yet the truth of the matter is, what has been, let's say for instance, posted on social media is out of context. And it is probably a remark that was made within the context of either a sermon or a conversation. Also instances whereby you call out a believer, and in this case a congregant, a member of your congregation. You call him or her out, you correct this person or you rebuke this person in love. And the next thing that will happen is you're accused of not loving that person, you're accused of being judgmental. So, most times, and even whenever I've discussed with pastors, we find ourselves in a state where we are wondering, are we to walk on eggshells? Does it mean that we cannot correct people? I mean, if let's say, for instance, you've been caught in the act of sexual immorality, and we know very well that these are things that the scriptures forbid. The next thing is somebody saying that I'm being judged. So what am I supposed to do? Do I allow you to fool around and then you end up dealing with a pregnancy or an STD? You see, those are things that we keep asking ourselves as pastors. You want to make a decision and we try to advise you otherwise, and you insist on that decision. And what is most disturbing is when somebody uses the scriptures to justify. Or you've been in a church, and I'm talking about a member. You've been in a church for some time, and then because of your own personal struggles, your own insecurities, you feel you want to transition. Instead of you transitioning quietly, you decide to look for a reason. And that reason is the pastor. So you now come up with a narrative that is either untrue. Because most times, people come up with stories about us which are not really true. So you end up projecting your frustration on the pastor. And the truth is, maybe even the pastor doesn't even know what exactly is going on. So the person leaves church and ends up saying, you know what, Bishop Gobanga said this, he did this and that. And the bit which is most disturbing is that information will be believed by many people. Very few will bother to come to me so as to establish the truth. And the few who get to know the truth get very surprised. But now, what about those people out there who do not know the truth? Yeah. So, being a pastor, I can tell you, is very risky. Why do I call it risky? It's because your life is open. You open your house to people. You expose your personality to people, and that is what the congregants will use against you. And let's not also make a mistake of thinking that pastors are not human beings. We make mistakes. We have weaknesses. The only difference between me and you is the grace of God upon my life as a pastor, but we are essentially human. So most times, even just as we are accused of not extending grace to the congregants, the congregation do not want to extend grace to us. So you find that at the end of the day, the pastor also has to go through his own trauma, if I may put it that way, distress. And in other jurisdictions, pastors resign because of how they are treated by the congregants.
Have you ever gotten to that point where you wanted to sting wachaikai?
There was a time I wanted to quit Infinite Fellowship Ministries. Yeah, because of things that were going on that I could not understand. But later on, the Spirit of God told me no, and my father in the Lord got in touch with me, and he talked me out of that, because he also told me that he had wanted to quit when he was a pastor. He had wanted to quit being the senior pastor of his ministry, but he had to. He decided to change his mind. So yes, there are times, pastors come to that point. I have come to that point. I wanted to quit. I just felt, these congregants, they are so used to me, and I don't think I really want them. I actually wanted to go, but I had to have a change of mind, because at the end of the day, it is God who's called me, not the congregant. Yeah, between 75 to 80% of pastors in the U.S. resign every year because of myriad of issues. Some of it could be as a result of burnout, because pastors also suffer from burnout. Also unfulfilled expectations, especially from the congregation. When you have a certain expectation from the congregation and they fail you, it becomes very frustrating. Also family, pastors are people who they are husbands and they are also wives of their spouses. Pastors are fathers and mothers of their children. So you find that there are certain challenges within the family that can be very overwhelming. And as a result, you find that a pastor would feel like, you know what, I need to resign. Yeah.
Ministry suffers.
Yeah, the ministry suffers. Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot to think about. That's a lot to think about. So final question. If you are to quit being a minister today, let's assume God just speaks to you and tells you, you've done well, but this is where you stop, and you are no longer a minister. What profession would you do and enjoy it? Like, he would not tell you go to this profession, he'll just leave it to you to decide. Where would your passion be?
I think the answer to that question is relative, considering the fact that I'm a teacher by profession, but I don't really think I have the grace to go back to the teaching career. Based on my own musings, that when I consider various aspects of what I see going on in the marketplace, something along the lines of IT and also art.
Wow.
Because I used to do art, before, but I took a break. I took a break. I remember teaching my younger brother, Pastor Tony, how to draw when he was still young. But amazingly, he's the one who went on with his, to develop his artistic skills. But for me, I think I reached a point I decided to take a break from that. But I believe that is the one thing that I would like to probably consider going back to. The other thing that I would actually say, and maybe, I don't know, just maybe, this is the one thing that I would also like to probably consider doing, is also music. Because I've been a pianist. Then again, I stopped playing the piano some years ago.
So there's a lot of creative skills there.
Yes.
Yeah.
I tend to consider myself as very prolific. That's why, because when you're prolific, you're very creative. I like creativity. So there's IT, there's art, and there's music. But if you are to ask me to choose which one would stand out, if I'm to choose one, I think I would incline more to music, followed by maybe art, and then probably IT. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. Though the art thing, I've always sensed it somewhere there.
Yeah.
Especially music.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have a parting shot, to the people who are listening, whether it's ministers like you or congregant or just fellow Kenyans. What would you like to say to them?
I may not have much to say, but I know we live in very unique times in our nation and even in the body of Christ. We are living at a time whereby people within the Kenyan society, they are on the verge of giving up because of the economic situation. There are those who are struggling even in ministry and even at family level. But I want to tell us, beloved, that number one, we have a beautiful country. No matter what is going on, it's beautiful. And number two, we cannot give up on ourselves just because of the fact that life has been tough. This is a time for us to reflect more and do less of complaining. Instead of complaining, I charge us to be part of the solution. Let's look for solutions so that we can make our country a better place. Let us find ways and means of being a blessing to the person who is next to you. Being a blessing to a person doesn't mean that you're necessarily friends. You can be a blessing even to a stranger. Because the times we live is a time whereby everyone is self-centered. People are thinking about themselves. They're thinking about their families and so on. But I think if we can be a bit more selfless and think of those who have no capability of doing any kind of good to us, probably would actually make a difference, because one act of benevolence, one act of kindness could actually save a soul. Yeah.
One of the things that we believe in the Truest Measure podcast is that we believe in giving men their flowers when they are still alive, right? And that's just a way of us saying that we see you, we recognize you, we see what you're doing and the impact you're having, and we appreciate you. So these are our flowers for you. So you can have that. Okay. So it was specifically assorted by Soila.
Your wife?
Yes, my wife. She understands flowers more than I do and the meanings of it. So this is baby breath and eucalyptus. And it's basically to say that you're a breath of fresh air for our times and for our generations. So continue what you are doing, continue doing God's work, because there are many of us who are being blessed in as much as we may not advertise it. Yeah. So thank you very much, Bishop. Yeah.
Okay, this is quite interesting.
Yeah. So guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Of course, look out for the next one. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think about this conversation, what we've talked about, what you can resonate with, what you can familiarize yourself with what we've shared. And yeah, thank you. Cheers.